nurses are seated here, and other staff of the hospital, we welcome you, and we declare this workshop open. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining me today for this workshop on art therapy. I'm a pleasure to be here. It's a privilege that the U.S. Embassy was able to bring me here to work with all of you and kind of give you some information and knowledge about using art, especially in the medical field and in the hospitals. Okay? So if I can kindly ask, if you have your phone with you, either turn it off or put it on silence, please, so that we don't disturb the workshop as we go. That will be greatly appreciated. Using art therapy for trauma patients, cancer patients, and substance abuse patients. So I'm hoping that this will be a really informative workshop. I welcome questions that you may have. I have a questions and answers section at the end. However, if I am going through something you don't understand or you want me to clarify, please let me know. Just raise your hand and I will get your questions, okay? So to begin with, I'll give you a little bit background about myself and how I got here today. My name is Gyimah-Boadi. I'm from the U.S. and I'm an art therapist. To get to be an art therapist in the U.S., I had pursued my bachelor's and then I had to go and get my graduate in art therapy. So I started really basic, have a fine arts background, but I actually got my bachelor's in human relations, which is a really broad spectrum for sociology and psychology classes. But I also needed that fine arts background to be able to pursue the graduate degree of art therapy. After I got my bachelor's, I figured out I wanted to be an art therapist. I wanted to work with children with developmental disabilities, and using art was one of the ways that you can work with them. So I decided to pursue my art therapy career. I applied for admission to the George Washington University in DC. I got accepted. And that program is a 2 to 3 year program that takes you through many different courses, and in the end you come out as an art therapist. And that's where I am today. I've worked with a variety of different populations, starting with children all the way to seniors. I currently work with seniors suffering from Alzheimer's and dementia at a senior living community. I also do community therapy, where I actually go out into the community, visiting people's homes, and doing therapy and art therapy together, okay? So that's just a little bit about my background. Psychotherapy and human experience within a psychotherapeutic relationship. When we are talking about art therapy, which is always facilitated by a professional art therapist, it effectively supports personal and relations, promote insight, enhance social skills, reduce and resolve conflicts and stress, and advance societal and ecological changes. So this is a really broad definition of what art therapy is. All right. Who do you think could benefit from art therapy? Any ideas? Who benefits from therapy, counseling, going to a counselor? Clients? Everybody. Truthfully, anybody can benefit from art therapy. Art therapists, right? And it's a long list. Anybody who works in the human health services, you know that you have to be passionate and caring. That's one of the biggest things, because you're caring for another human being, okay? So first and foremost, to be an art therapist, you need to pursue a master's level professional education, okay? Now I'll talk a little bit about that. You need to be caring. You have to be a great listener. You can't listen to your clients. You're not going to know what the real root of the issues are to be able to deal with them. You have to be empathetic, be feeling. You need to be patient, very, very patient. Therapy takes years sometimes. You all know this. It's not just one day you come in and we fix all your problems. Some people can be in therapy for up to like 10 years or more. We have to be very, very patient and willing to work with these individuals. We have to be dedicated to multicultural and social justice related issues. I say multicultural because we never know who we're going to work with. We could be working with all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds with all different ethnicities. So you have to be willing to work with different people. Another one we do is to engage in the community. I advocate for this all the time. There's nothing like community work. Community work has the power to heal individuals. Bringing communities together, it's a wonderful thing. Researchers. Art therapists are researchers. We have to let other professions know that what we do matters. So being a good researcher in this field is very, very integral. Thinkers, we have to think outside of the box. One thing doesn't work with a client, we have to think of something else that might work with that client. We're also adaptive, knowledge about the arts and art materials. Now, you guys have the privilege of having the clinical background that a lot of art therapists have, but maybe not the arts. So learning more about different art types, different art materials that your clients could use to be able to express themselves. That's really important as well. And the willingness to learn. Every day I'm learning something new, right? So you have to be open-minded and be learning and be adapting and changing so that you can provide your clients with the best health possible. Improvement of physical, mental, emotional, and state of being. Transform the hospital experience. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that later on, because this is why I'm here today, to impart some knowledge about how you can incorporate art into the health field. We have anybody with a strong interest in art, psychology, and engagement with others may be a good art therapist, but it doesn't mean just because you have all those qualities that art therapy is the way to go. You need to be also very passionate about what you want. Acceptance and completion of an ADA accreditation master's level art therapy program. So this is the association in America that accredits programs at different universities that say yes, they have the educational guidelines to provide people with education so that once they leave, they can call themselves art therapists. Canada has one, Britain has one, and Australia and New Zealand have one. Unfortunately, a lot of other places don't have associations that can accredit programs. Or there's actually no program at all. For example, here in Nigeria, there's no real art therapy program that people can go to, learn all the things they need to learn about becoming an art therapist. We have a minimum of 61 credit hours in studio arts, psychology assessment, group work, and multiculturalism courses, among other courses. It's a 2 to 3 year program. It takes a long time to learn all the stuff we need to be an art therapist. 100 hours of supervised practicum and 600 hours of on-site supervised art therapy clinical work. So we're not just taught theory and then thrown out into the street saying, hey, go practice art therapy. We actually implement it. It's a very, very hands-on program. Over the 2 to 3 years, students have to go through internships at different locations, working with different populations to be able to come out and say that they're an art therapist, okay? Art therapists may provide instruction on some of the materials that are being used, especially if it's something new to the client. However, our job is not to teach them how to, use a pencil or a crayon and shade in and how to get this. We provide some, but we really want the client to explore on their own. Okay, exploring is part of the process. And art therapists will never tell a client what their work means. Okay? We're never going to say, oh, I see you drew a line there. This must mean X, Y, and Z. No. Because sometimes we could be way wrong, right? We always try and get what the client intended to draw. Maybe they drew a circle, but they're like, no, I drew an elephant. You would have never known that, right? In their mind, they drew that circle to represent an elephant. Okay? So it's about finding out what it means to them. I want you to be able to use art to enhance your career and your profession, so using art as therapy. Okay, and a lot of people, you can think of art as therapy, for example, people using coloring books. If you have coloring books in the hospital setting, if a child is coming in for treatment, they might be really high-strung, very high anxiety, but when they sit down and do a little bit of coloring, their anxiety lessens, and then it becomes easier to deal with that kid when you're doing their treatment, right? So that's what we mean when we say art as therapy. There are different approaches to how we may use art therapy in any setting. One is a very structured approach, and one is a kind of open studio model. And I'll just go a little bit over each of them. So in the structured approach, it could be individual, it could be in a group. People come in, we do a check-in, then we do an introduction or the directive of what they're going to do today. So if For example, if a patient comes in, my patient is dealing with depression, they're done creating their artwork, you talk about the artwork with them. You ask them questions about what they did. You know, what the colors mean, what does this image mean, what does this symbol mean. You're getting their interpretation of what they've drawn, and also helps them talk about the issue that they're there for. Okay, then you have cleanup. I always include cleanup in my sessions because art can be messy. You don't want your clients leaving you with a whole lot of mess to clean up, especially if you have another client right behind them. So including that also helps set boundaries and encourages them to continue doing that, right? So they'll clean up and then we'll wrap up the session. Now the next approach is an open studio model. Now this is best in places where like you can have a space specifically for art or for creating, where they can come in, you know, do a little check-in, they do some art making. There's not really a directive or a theme. Sometimes you can give a theme, but most of the time they come in just expressing themselves and creating whatever they want. And then they have the option of processing or they don't. They don't have to talk about their artwork. This is the time just for them to be able to come in and create. And I found that a lot of the time that works best in the hospital setting, where people are able to just come and create what they want, kind of get their emotions and feelings out without really having to talk about that artwork safe. This doesn't keep all their private information safe. Okay, so that's one of the big things in terms of working with patients, is the confidentiality of stuff. Now I wanted to get more into why you guys are here today, to learn about art therapy and how it can be used in hospitals. So I broke it down a little bit to talk about just art therapy versus maybe hospital art. So like an artist who may come into a hospital and do art with patients, or you know, just patients engaging in artwork, not really with any goal in mind, right? So art therapy in medicine is different from hospital art programs, whatever medical issue that brought them there, right? So art therapy is a way for people staying in hospitals to be able to express themselves, to be able to process, to help them communicate better, or just release how they're feeling about the healthcare experience itself. Okay, it has nothing to do with maybe the nurses or the doctors, but just the experience of them being in that healthcare facility. We help them to be able to release that stress of it. The art therapist may visit people by bedsides. I myself have worked in the hospital as an art therapist. I worked at Children's National Washington, D.C. on the oncology and hematology unit. So I was working with children with cancer, okay, children with leukemia and all kinds of stuff. I had a little open studio where children could come in and do art every day. And then I also visited patients by bedside if they weren't able to come to the open studio, because there are a lot of cases where they can't leave their room. We also had children on isolation. People in the bone marrow transplant unit, they were quarantined off, isolated. Nobody could go in there unless they had all the proper gear on. So children like that, I would have to take the art to them, okay? But I have to be very careful, especially with those in the bone marrow transplant unit, because any slightly contaminated item could cause an infection. Very hard to do, especially if you're not seeing those clients anymore, okay? So I decided to show you guys some of the artwork that I have done, and this specifically in relation to trauma. A lot of the artwork, the directives that we give to our clients, we ourselves have to do them. You can't tell your client to do something you've never done it before. You don't know what that experience feels like. So they can tell you and talk to you all about it, but it's like, you have never gone through that. Any directive I give to a client, I try it out myself so that I can know what that experience feels like. This one is called a safety collage. Now what we're told to do is to pick two images. One that's scary, one that makes us afraid, and one that makes us feel joy or happiness, enlightenment, and to put those two images together. So we're trying to turn a negative to a positive, right? And just looking angry. And that was not pleasant to me. I don't like when people yell or, you know, scream. And then on the other one, I picked a bird. It's a swan. It's flying. Its wings are out. And to put them together, I wanted to make something that would bring light. So I felt like the swan was flying over this dark figure, and I colored it all in black so I wouldn't be able to see it, trying to turn that negative into a positive. The other one I did is called A Safe Space. And I did this one as a response to some trauma I had heard from one of my clients, right? And this client...
Actually, when I was coming, I was expecting art therapy for HIV patients. But I wasn't expecting this. And a lot of information. If I'll go home with one or two things. The first being that art, especially when it has to do with clients, is not only about skills, but processing. And also, that saying goodbye, it could be a positive way of saying, there's a positive way of saying goodbye. But I have one or two questions.
Sure.
The first question is, this art therapy, is it mainly for children, or both children and adults? And peradventure, you get a client.
Treatment for all. We as art therapists also have to decide, okay, this person might not be suitable to do art therapy. For your case, example, you don't like art. That's perfectly fine. I will never force somebody to do art that is not interested or want to do art.
Now, before me is a flat sheet of paper, and the cup is standing on the table. How do I do the paper on the sheet of paper? So, if I happen to be your client, I know that, but I don't know how to draw. So, how are you going to help me?
Hey, that one is hard. As I told you, I'm not an art teacher. So I will not put a cup in front of you and tell you to draw. That's first and foremost. Although I've done that because some people I've worked with actually wanted to look at something and draw. But in that instance, hey, sorry. I feel sorry. That's hard. This is what I always do. If there's, let's say somebody's painting from a picture or from an item, I tell them to just focus on one area, one aspect of it. You know, let's say the cup, maybe the cup was red. Well, think about the color first. Pick that red color. Or if you want to use a different color, that's fine. But start from any point of that cup, right? Maybe you're going to start at the top. So visualizing that top, looking at that top, and then starting there. The cup is not going to be standing up on your paper. You know that. It's going to be flat. It's going to be flat. But trying to see that cup flat can also be very hard for some people. You know, depth perception and all that. I have an issue with that one myself. But you don't have to be artistic and skilled. If you just want to draw the cup as a round thing with a cross on the top, that's fine. If you tell me that's a cup, I'll believe you. That's the point of art. I don't want you to visual representation of that. I want you to just be able to draw, and then the process of drawing that. All right, well, I really hope you guys found this presentation informative and useful. I really wish I could have been here longer. There's so much more I could tell you. I did my course in 3 years. My head is filled with stuff, right? And all of this, I have the clinician background, I have the art background, just to be able to do art therapy. So most people look at it and probably, if they see me working at a table with a client, they just think I'm doing arts and crafts with them, right? But there's so much more to it, and I really hope that I've given you guys a little bit of an insight to what we actually do. Okay, so thank you all for coming.